which I'd encourage parents to do. Don't let your kids win. Like, teach them how to lose. And like, if they lose over and over and over and over again to you, well, they're probably just going to work harder and harder and harder. And I think it's a really great example. Like, what's up, guys? This is Scott again with Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. Today, I have with me Trevor Wittwer. Trevor is a father of two youngins. He is a business owner, a real estate investor, and a software company founder. He's just a really cool guy. I've gotten to know him over the last few months and can't wait to have this conversation. But first, I want to talk about the big event coming up. That's in September 2022. It's happening in Montana in the Kalispell area. It's actually at Lakeside. We have a house right on the lake. But this event is going to be rad. And I don't even know a better way to say this. I want you to listen and see if this fits you. If you're a man who craves adventure, wants challenge, understands that there's growth in challenge, and wants to be around other men who will be along with you on that journey, this is an event for you. I created this with my friend Josh and Alex Jowdy because we all crave that. We all crave having a tribe to hang out with. We all crave being around other men who will force us to do harder things or encourage us or inspire us to do harder things. So we created this. It's in Montana. It's just 3 days, September 8th through the 11th. We're going to be doing some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We have an awesome seminar by multiple black belts with an amazing organization up there. So beginner to advanced doesn't matter. You're going to get something. We're going to be doing some tactical firearms training and shooting and competition, which is going to be rad. We're going to be doing some amazing rucking with a guy named Jason Piccolo, who he's on Court TV. He's on he's done a lot. He's actually going to he's speaking, and Rob Wolf's going to come talk to us about business and all things raising kids and having a business. This is going to be an incredible event, a lot of bonding, fun times, big bonfires. And we'll culminate with a 9/11 ruck. And so it's pretty cool. We have some amazing sponsors. I know I'm going to forget some. Loam Coffee just signed on. Loam Coffee's been sending me coffee for a long time. They are rad. They take some of their money and they give it to world organizations to help impoverished kids get involved in mountain biking, which is something I love. And we have, oh my gosh, just so much. Go Ruck is helping us out. Sog Knives is helping us out. We're getting a bunch of Black Rifle coffee. I'm sorry, I can't even say it all. There's just so much going on. So check it out, brotherhoodfatherhood.com. More on that page coming soon, but you'll want to get on that list. Woo, mouthful. Welcome to the show, Trevor. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
I should have a list. It's pretty hard to talk about an event with sponsors when I'm getting new ones every week. It's like, wow, I just named off two. We're going to be caffeinated. Lots of caffeine at this trip. So it's going to be fun. How's your week going?
Man, it's going well. Yeah, it's going well. It's springtime in Minnesota. So this is a great time of year.
What's the weather like there in the spring? I know it's cold in the winter.
It's nice. Like the beauty of Minnesota is we get all 4 seasons. Some of them are shorter and longer than others, but we kind of get a nice spring where it's like 60s, 70s, and we're in it for a little bit now. But I mean, I think we're going to be hitting 90s by Memorial Day. So we'll be full on summertime.
Is it humid in the summer?
Yeah, it's pretty humid. It's hot. Yeah, hot and humid. I mean, it's lake country. So people, I mean, they kind of do the lake thing. Yeah. So yeah, no mountains, unfortunately, but
yeah, I just have to
I have to travel for that. So,
yeah. Well, I live in Texas, so I kind of with you. I mean, when people call a mountain here, I live in a town called Flower Mound, and there's literally a mound, and It's all like fenced off and this big deal, and it's the highest point in the city, and it's got to be like 50 feet up. It's ridiculous. So I get it. Well, we had fun connecting on my other podcast, and we've talked some business thing because of your software company, which is awesome. It provides solutions for gym owners and coaches alike. And so we were just talking and getting to know you. I'm like, you got to come on the show. And one thing that's really kind of a big deal is, like, for me, I have teenagers now. I just have right now I have 2 boys. My oldest just graduated high school. His last day was yesterday, and he's got his graduation on Memorial Day. And then, he's stepping into quote unquote manhood. And then my youngest is just graduating middle school and going to high school next year. So I love talking to guys who have, who are a little earlier in the game, and you're pretty early.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a head start on me. So like we have a 5-year-old who will be 6 in October, and he's gonna be headed to kindergarten. And then we have a 3-year-old as well. And so 2 boys, a lot of energy, super, super high energy, especially our oldest is like uber energy all the time. So he's going to be he's going to be an interesting kid to try and wrangle.
Yeah. But it's so exciting having kids with just full energy in life. I mean, I struggle because I taught in the middle schools and elementary schools for 13 years.
Okay.
And it's really interesting how kids come in, and those ones that are full, like really full of energy, they're spitball, they're just moving, and their brain is working and they're active. And what I saw and what I hate seeing is a lot of times, because you have to get so much done in a day, you have to bridle that and push it into like a direction that maybe not fitting with them. Is that something you worry about? Are you going to homeschool, or what have you been?
No, he's going. I'm not the homeschool type. That would not be a happy life for me or my wife. Daycare is a blessing for us. And so I mean, that's kind of something we think about is, I mean, he's just a kid that needs to move. Like he is physical. And, the nice thing is he goes to a private school in town, and the class sizes are a little bit smaller. And so, he's just going to need like fidget things. Like he'll need like, that thing under your desk to swing his foot or whatever. And the teachers are all really good about trying to accommodate for kids. And honestly, I think desks are probably one of the like worst inventions for kids anyways. Like it just doesn't make sense when we sit kids in a desk and their body basically just starts deteriorating because they're sitting around all day for 6 hours a day. But that's probably for another podcast.
Oh my gosh, we could go on and on about that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so things I'm like, so we're in this stage right now of like our kids are going to be okay. Like we live in a nice neighborhood. We have plenty of everything. Like they're not going to really have a whole lot of like challenges per se, barring any weird things that could happen, obviously. But from like a financial standpoint, like they're going to be okay. From a family standpoint, they're going to be okay. Grandparents are close. Like they have just like it, they're going to have a nice life. And so, I mean, one thing we know about people is we adapt, right? We adapt, and challenges are what actually help us to really grow. Mm-hmm. And so something I think about with these kids is like, how do we, in a way, create almost like artificial challenges, or we create adversity in their lives to help them kind of grow as individuals? Because from a life standpoint, like they're not going to get it from the day-to-day stuff outside of like, I mean, sports are going to be a big thing. Like I was a kind of a sports fanatic, played basketball for 25 years. And so they'll get it through sports, but like you kind of only get so much. And it to me, it feels like the people that have had a fair amount of adversity in their life are people that turn out pretty good because they've had to really figure it out. So I don't have the answer to it. I heard a story about one guy, and I don't know if it's true or not, but he would like drop his kids off like in the forest and basically make them find their way home kind of stuff. And I'm like, maybe, like, I don't know, but I don't know. Do you have any experience with kind of creating?
Well, this is something I think about a lot, and I actually talk about it on the podcast relatively frequently. Mm-hmm. And one of my own life themes is, I think, Rich Froning coined the term "into the storm," where, you really want to turn towards adversity and really just take it head on. So it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. And last year I was kind of, I was thinking a lot about my boys and really how easy they had it and how easy I had made it for them. Mm-hmm. And I was struggling because I was literally praying that they would have adversity in their life. But as a father, that's incredibly difficult.
Right.
I want my kids to have adversity because I know that adversity is what will actually mold them into someone who can handle life and be successful on their own. And so I've struggled with this a lot. And I actually have some things I'm currently doing at the age that they're at. So I can definitely talk about the things at the older age, but I didn't do a good job at this, in my opinion, at the age your kids are at. I was very absent because I was so busy building businesses and involved in and that's really the reason I started this was I don't want dads to get sucked into the wrong thing and lose track of, what they really should be doing, which is raising future adults. And so, man, that's a pretty layered onion to peel back. there's literally a week and a half ago, I had an outpouring of tears and breakdown over this exact conversation. So my son, I was driving down the road and my neighbor just taught his boys how to mow the lawn, and he's there weed eating. And, in Texas and weeding, it's hot, it's gross. You get beat to crap probably everywhere. Weeding's horrible. And I was like, man, I've had my kids mow the lawn, but I've always protected them from the weed eating. And I know this, I'm going somewhere with this. I was like, what am I doing? Am I doing them any good? I'm like, no, there's pain involved with it. It sucks. You're going to get dinged up from rocks coming up and hit you, especially on my property. And so I came home and I'm like, hey, Bryson, my oldest, I know that you mow the lawn, you got to mow the lawn. And I've been protecting you from weed eating. And I know this sounds silly, but I'm going to have you start weed eating. It's time that you need to start stepping into this thing. And I've not done it for me because I thought you might get hurt, but I'm thinking now is the time. You're turning 18. Like, it's way too late. And so he goes out to mow the lawn. He's grumpy, doesn't want to do it. And I'm showing him the weed eater and he doesn't want to do it. And he does a really bad job. And he's getting hit and it's hurting him. And he's just so frustrated. And I go out there and I show him one more pass. And I come in and my wife's like, hey, I'm like, this is really hard on me. And what it turned out to, Trevor, is I'm so excited where you're at now because you're avoiding what you're going to avoid what I did. Is I've protected my kids because I was so guilty about not being around when they were super young that I've tried to protect them and be in this father who never really subjected them to hard things because I have guilt. So I walk in, I'm like, Kim, this is really hard. And she goes, Scott, your son is amazing. He needs to learn hard things. You need to forgive yourself for not being there earlier on. No one else cares at this point. We all forgiven you. We all love you. You have an amazing bond with your son. And I just like the waterworks went off. And so this is a really hot topic for me. I'm sorry, I'm kind of stealing the show here, but it's a really hot topic because it brought back a lot of pain. But then I went back out again. I go, hey, son, I know this sucks. And I know you don't want to do it. Every time I come out here, I don't want to do it too. But you're never going to get good at it. And you're never going to be able to do it on your own at your own house and then teach your kids. If I don't teach you, you did a bad job on weed eating because I didn't show you well enough. We need to do one more pass. And the third pass, he got it amazingly well. And I could tell when he came in, there was a sense of pride. It wasn't just mowing the lawn and there's stuff sticking up everywhere this time. He was mowing the lawn. Everything was clean and primed and looked really good. And I'm like, and so I tell you all of that to say, yes, absolutely engage in making sure you're subjecting your kids, even if it's lawn mowing, right. The harder things in life, don't protect them. It's doing them no favors whatsoever.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we have kind of a saying in our house, is like, we do hard things. And so, we had there'll be times when Asher, our oldest, did something he didn't want to do. And then he kind of says, I did a hard thing. And it's like, all right, good. We want to get comfortable with doing hard things. But then he can be a pansy sometimes too. And he needs to suck it up a little bit, but
human nature.
Right. So, I mean, that's something I think about is he's going to be involved in sports. And so you're going to get adversity from sports for sure. And I think that's one of the huge values from sports. The idea of just kind of working hard and putting in the work and reaping the rewards. There's a lot of stuff there that you don't really realize it until you kind of later and you look back on it. Because when you're there, I mean, at least for me, it was just like, we want to win. And
Yeah.
we were fortunate to have good teams, and we did a lot of it, which I think also helps with like a mindset of going out and expecting to do well. And so there's going to be that, but I mean, I just kind of think about, are there other ways to, you know, help with the adversity thing? I think it was Dan Martell that said this when his kids were really young, zipping their coats. So he'd have them zip their coats, and he would just wait for them to zip their coats, even if it took 5 minutes, and they would sit there and struggle and kind of get frustrated, and have to fight through it. And so I would say that's probably one thing I try and do a little bit more of, is just kind of let my kids get frustrated with stuff.
Yes.
I think as parents, we just want to jump in and solve the problem, especially as like, if you're a business owner, like all you do all day is solve problems and put out fires. And so that can bleed into your home life pretty quickly. But we realize that we're not actually doing them any justice by solving their problem, because we've already figured it out. And so we need to allow them the space and time to do that as well.
I think you hit a really good point there. It's, and I did this with my younger son. I ordered a rooftop tent. My oldest son, for his graduation, him and I are doing like a 2.5-week road trip.
Cool.
We put a rooftop tent on my truck on a bed rack on the back, and we're going to drive like 4,000 miles. And he's going, and the whole idea was for him to learn to build fires, to learn how to set up camp, how to learn to take down, to be moving, to drive. We're taking my standard transmission truck. He's going to learn to drive that. We're going to do hard things all the way, you know, maybe carry heavy rucks and do some things in really big mountains. Taking the guns, we're going to do all sorts of things. But I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to have my younger son come put this thing together with me. And here, where I've always struggled is I want it done fast, because I'm like you, I'm a business owner. I come in, I fix things, and I move on, right? Well, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like lay all the pieces out, because it's a heavy unit. It's like 125 pounds. You have to put these plates on. You have to lift it up. You have to install some hardware. And I'm like, hands off. Like, this is how you do it. And just sitting there and watching it. No, it took 4 times longer for him to do it. But what an incredible opportunity. There's so many of those opportunities every day, like zipping up your jacket, tying your shoes. If we can refrain from doing those things for them, we're teaching them tenacity. We're teaching them perseverance. And so I think there's opportunities every single day. And I think what we have to do as fathers is just be super mindful of them, and then slow down to speed up. It's one of the sayings I really love. Like, it's going to take longer. It took longer for my son and I to put that rooftop tent together. And when we were done, I'm like, we got to lift this onto the truck. He's like, I can't do it. I'm like, what do we say? What I tell them, what do we say instead? He's like, it's like, I could be better at that. We don't say I can't do it. It's like, I need some practice at that. And I'm like, we got to try. He's like, yeah, okay. So anyway, we went through this process. It was really hard, but again, the sense of pride at the end, and now knowing that he's better at threading nuts on a bolt and tightening things and understanding sizing and reading instructions. And I think as fathers, we're always in a hurry. And this is where I talk about intentional action. We talk a lot about intentionality, but it really takes intentional action or inaction, where you're intentional and you just slow down and let your kids push through and figure things out. I think at the young age, that's what you do. And you place them in opportunities to have some social interactions with kids that may not go super well. So if you're not into public schools, make sure your kids are involved in a lot of things going on, because there's going to be a lot of adversity, especially in the middle school ages, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Holy cow. Yeah. So manufactured and just opportunities are all around.
And like, I mean, for us too, like there's a lot of time from 3 p.m. when school gets done to 9 p.m. at night that a lot of learning, maybe more kind of real world learning, can take place. And that's kind of what I look at as as a kind of business owner and doing a bunch of different things. I try to set at least some boundaries where, 5 o'clock, like things are shutting down and we're kind of moving into the home life. I think that's a big piece, or I could be doing stuff all the time. So having some boundaries for myself, where, hey, once this hits, it's time to get after it with the kids a little bit. But so let's kind of switch gears here a little bit, and I just want to ask you this question, and just curious on what your thoughts are on it. Maybe it's come up before, maybe it hasn't, but will you leave your kids an inheritance?
I've thought about this. This is really interesting. And you're talking about I'm guessing you're in the perspective of making it easy for them when they.
Yeah, like, I mean, will there be will there be a trust? Will they get anything? So I went back and forth on this, and I'll let you kind of talk first, and then I'll maybe chime in a little bit.
I think the big ticket here is not giving them everything they want and not being super, overprotective through their young years and even their young married college years, letting them struggle, making them they have to earn their own way. Mm-hmm. They have to work hard. At that point, I'm okay leaving an inheritance, but mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of it where they're coddled, they're taken care of, and then they leave an inheritance. You're like, if they hadn't gotten that, would they even survive? And the answer usually is like, no, they just wouldn't know what to do. So I think with the right setup, the right process, and making sure all the learning lessons are in play, I would say yes. Personally, I've thought of this a lot. I would rather leave like a business that needs to be run, or mm-hmm. they need to go figure out how to sell it if they want to, move on with their life, or something that involves some level of work or ownership, instead of just like, hey, here's $500K cash for you, or 3 million cash that you're going to get through the next 10 years. I've had family members that have had that, and it's a disaster. Mm-hmm. It's an absolute disaster. I have I don't want to get into specifics, but a lot of trust money, and they've had the hardest life. I mean, the most trouble, the worst marriages, the most troubled kids. They just don't. It's really sad. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I thought about. So there's a piece of me, like initially the piece of me is like, man, my kids aren't getting anything. They can earn their own way type thing. And then after I maybe slow down and think about it a little bit, I think there's some value in certain aspects, if it's education, helping with that, because you see some kids when they come out of school with a bunch of college debt, like that really sets you back. Like if you come out of school with $60K in debt, like that really limits your possibilities. If school is the right thing, like I don't know if we'll see how expensive a 4-year education is by the time my kids get there. But at the rate it's going right now, it's just the benefit you're getting from it maybe isn't worth what you're putting into it. And so I kind of look at, what are the things that are maybe better them. I've also thought about like even like a way for them to leverage something. So, mm-hmm. Maybe it's a trust or something that they don't actually have access to, but they can leverage it to go get a loan or something else. So there's kind of a little bit of help, but not direct, and they can't screw it up. And they could screw it up, but they can't just go blow it on whatever.
Yeah. Man, I have so many directions to go here because my son is graduating. So I want to talk about that. I actually mm-hmm. want to talk about college, but and career path and what, these rite of passage things that we do. But I feel like there's this long lasting and standing norm that we should save up money to pass it away when we die. Mm-hmm. Hey, look, I'm not wasting money. I'm not throwing money away, but I am not saving everything for tomorrow by giving up today. So first of all, my first response to that is my wife and I are going to live. We're going to live amazing lives. Our kids are going to have great opportunities. One of our big goals is to be able to take them and their families on vacations. That's how we want to support them. Like we're going to take you all to Hawaii for a week. We'll take care of the flight and the place. You take care of the rest. That's the type of stuff we want to give. And if that means less for when we pass, I'm okay, because I want them to have, my whole goal is for them to have skill sets that they can provide for themselves.
Right.
So my son was going to go to college for music performance. He's a really great trombone player. and he picked one school, and then he got into some other schools he didn't care about. And he picked one school with only 5 spots available, and it's very competitive. And he was number 6. And so we sat down with him, like, what are you going to do? Like, we're stressed out. I kind of hate college. I have a master's degree. I've done the whole college thing. My wife has a PhD. Like, we're very educated, but we're like both not using it. I learned a ton in school. And so we sat down with him, and I'm like, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't want to go to college. Just go to college. I'm like, well, you can have some great learning opportunities, but you're right. I mean, he's like, I have 0 direction. And he says, Dad, I always wanted to be a business owner. You're a business owner. I love how your life looks. I'm like, okay, how do you teach that? So we decided he's doing a year internship with us, with me.
Okay, cool.
He's doing a year internship with me. And then he's also wanting to travel to my friends who own businesses and learn their things as well. If they have a brick and mortar, or if they're doing something, we'll say, okay, like in lieu of college for a year, you got to pay some bills if you're going to live here, because that's not what we want, but right. You got to pay some bills, and then you're going to work. He's literally going to be working. He's going to learn the ins and outs of my business and the Brotherhood of Fatherhood as well. He's going to be very integral in all of that. He's going to learn content production, content creation, video editing, which he's super passionate about. And so my big thing is, like, college isn't right, Trevor, for everyone. Mm-hmm. It's not right. It's around, and we're getting a lot of pushback from people, like, well, when is he going to college? I don't know. If he feels like he needs to, we're totally cool with it. Well, he's not going to succeed. I'm like, if he really embraces this and learns from everybody I surround myself with, there's a good chance he's going to be about 5 years ahead of any of your kids on earnings. Right. So I don't know where I was going with that, but you just kind of struck a chord with really what's going on in our lives. But I would love to pass on a business or something they had to work for. Like, one of the things I want to do is own storage units. I'm just starting to look into it. Like, it's a great business. It's something my parents wanted to do and never did. And it's kind of like this torch I want to carry on. And I'm like, well, if I have 5 storage businesses across the southern states and they're very successful and they're paid for, and then fine, I'll pass those on. That's fine. Those are the types of things that I think about, but I don't think about giving away $5 million to them when I pass.
Funny you say storage units. We have a gym in a city about 25 miles away, and it's a pretty big building. It's about 9,000 square feet, and we don't need that much for the gym. And we're actually going to put probably 38 units in it, and half the building, and then the gym is in the rest. So yeah, it's wonderful. Definitely interesting model.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's always this kind of just like, that's what you do, right? And that's kind of, I think, the era that we grew up is like, what you do after high school is you just go to college. And so we've started to see a revival of the 2-year kind of technical school industry, which is awesome to see, because we just need those trade type professions, and a 4-year isn't right for everybody. And and I've even debated whether, like, there's a lot of countries that do the gap year, where it's like, all right, you spend a year, 'cause when you're 18, like, you don't have any idea what you want to do. No. Like, most kids don't.
Some kids do, but most don't.
And so, like, having that year to figure it out, and not just like sit around on the couch and hang out with your friends. It's like, do something like you're doing with your son, where it's productive, it's planned, it's, there's going to be a learning experience. And at the end of the day, you're at least going to know what you don't want to do, right. And which I think is also valuable. And then if a university education makes sense, awesome, like, go for it. But it's got to make sense. And I just don't think it makes sense for a lot of kids, especially at where potential price points get to.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, it's like, all right, for $100,000, like, all right, what's the return?
Yeah, so I mean, it's between 20 and 50,000 a year now for most just regular colleges. It's crazy.
It's pretty crazy. The school that I went to was almost doubled since I was there, and I'm 15 years out. And so, but like, for me, a lot of my motivations were driven by athletics, by sports. And so I wanted to keep playing. And so that's kind of like what you do in the United States, is you go to school and keep playing.
Yeah, and I want to talk about sports. So keep going, but I want to come back to that.
I mean, that's just kind of what it is. So I don't think there's really a right answer. I think we're getting better as a society and being like okay with kids maybe not going to college, but it's got to be like, let's do something with that time. And I like what you guys are doing as far as like a structured, hey, you're going to go hang out with this business owner for, a month or whatever. And then you're going to do some interning stuff here. And, maybe you're going to take a course on Udemy and that kind of stuff and get better at and kind of follow your passions. And if video editing and production and all that, there's a lot of really good YouTube videos and courses that you can get for a fraction of the price. And then if you have a way to actually apply it, like you're doing an internship or something like that, I mean, that's where real learning occurs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about sports.
Yeah.
You talked about your boys doing sports, and my wife is very competitive, played in college, volleyball, still has the plaques and the records at the high school for basketball. I mean, she's just and she's very athletic now. Neither of my boys are carrying on with sports after middle school. And so the way that we kind of looked at sports is you're going to do them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're doing football, you're doing basketball, you're doing track, you're going to do them. And that was one of the ways that we manufactured it, even if they didn't want to. Like, this is how we manufacture adversity. This is how we manufacture hard things, and then you also teach them about commitment. So you enroll in something, and we got this basketball season. Well, I'm the worst on the team. All right, but you made a commitment by enrolling. And so you're going to be the best person at being the worst on a team. You're going to go out there, you have best attitude. There's always, and I'm not saying they were, but there's always a learning opportunity. So we're teaching them commitment, and we're teaching them follow through. And then we're teaching them how to go through those games where you sat on the bench the whole time, or where you sit through a practice and kids are making fun of you, or you're small in football and it kind of just sucks. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how most people feel about that, but that's a beautiful birthing ground for adversity. And then by the time my kids hit high school, they both were like, I want to do band, and marching band in Texas is ridiculous. I mean, it makes football daily doubles look like nothing. My son literally leaves. This is my oldest, he would literally leave at 7 a.m. For their summer camps, and they're like long. Leave at 7 a.m., come home at 5, be back at 6, and be home at 11 p.m. And they're out in the sun in the Texas heat in the summer. I mean, it's insanity. And so he actually chose something that was ridiculously hard. He got into the leadership of it, which was very, very stringent. And so like sports were great. They were our vision, but then my boys got their own vision of what was hard. And for us, it's always like, we're not going to necessarily tell you what you have to do, but you have to be involved in something that challenges you. Mm-hmm. So something I wish I would have done with my kids, maybe jiu-jitsu. Like a lot of people put their kids in jiu-jitsu just because it's so incredibly difficult. That learning curve never ends rather.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that we've done.
So, I mean, there's some value to just like physical activity too, right? Like sports are great. But like a big part of sports is just like activity, like being out. Like we live in a world where like kids just by the nature of their environment aren't driven to be really active. Most of the stuff is technology driven. And so whether it's computers, games, iPads, that kind of stuff, which can be fine. But like anything, too much of anything becomes an issue. And when you're doing something, you're giving something else up. And so I think kids, if they're not involved in something, can have a tendency to become really inactive. And so just from a general movement health standpoint, like sports can kind of serve that purpose as well. And at that point, then like who really cares if you're the best or what on the team? But I mean, all the points that you already gave, I think are critical in the sport process. But then like allowing them at some point to make their own decisions. Like when you're like our philosophy with our kids is we're actually going to try and put them in as like many different sports as possible early on.
For sure.
Because you never really know what a kid's going to gravitate to. And if a kid wants to be elite at something, like we can worry about that once they, are 15, 16, 17 and can now start to really look at things. But just to build a well-rounded type athlete. But I mean, just to give some context too, my wife and I were both collegiate basketball players. She's like 5'11", I'm 6'6". And so like our kids are probably going to have some athletic ability. Like they're already showing it now. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to have some natural gifts from an athletic standpoint. And much of athletics, especially high level, elite level athletics, they're like the genetic component it's
huge.
It's not like you're not going to be an NBA basketball player if you're 5'6". Like right. That's just stats. And I've got a buddy that works for the Dallas Cowboys. He's a scout there, and they've got numbers on every single position. To give you an example, I think it's an offensive lineman. If an offensive lineman doesn't have a specific arm length, they automatically get cut from the scout board. Mm-hmm. So they have to have a specific arm. Then they have this for every position. They have certain physical attributes that position must have in order for them to kind of make the grade and move up or move to the next round of scouting. Because it's just like, if they don't have this long of an arm, a defensive end is going to be able to manhandle them because they're not going to be able to hold that person at length. And then they have it for everything. They have it for like cornerbacks and receivers. And I think he said there's like 3 things they evaluate people on, like physical attributes is one of them. And I don't remember what the other 2 are, but he says in order for physical attributes to be a non-issue is if they have to be absolutely elite, like the 1% of the 1% in other skills, like as a receiver, maybe they're short, but their route running is, the best in the country, they might move to the next round. But if their 40 isn't fast enough, if their height, if they're vertical, if those things, if you don't hit those numbers, like you're out. And so it's like looking at a kid too, if they want to be elite at something, giving them exposure to as many things as possible, because who knows, maybe they'll be a really good lacrosse player because of X, Y, and Z. We have no idea. And especially when they're young too. Like I have a buddy, my workout buddy, his kids are just starting to get into sports. And I'm not looking forward to the politics of youth sports. Like some of the stuff he's telling me now, like it's 3rd graders playing baseball and like the parents are having meetings about like, this is ridiculous. And I don't got time for this. But it's looking at like this kind of wide range of sports so that maybe they're good at this or maybe they're good at that. And ultimately you're developing athletic prowess, like you're just athletic skills. And then once you start getting into the 7th and 8th grades and really starting to look at, all right, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? And if I even enjoy sports anymore. But for my kids, it's like, if you don't want to play sports, cool, but you got to find something active to do. Like there will be involvement in some sort of movement practice. Because I think just a movement practice of sorts is like paramount to just a healthy life in general.
A few things I want to say to that, because I'm 100% in agreement. 1, expose them to all sorts of opportunities. I have a friend, they're a couple and they have their son and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so painful to watch him in sports. He's so uncoordinated. Mm-hmm. He loves football, but he's so uncoordinated. Well, one day he was practicing and they put him in long snapper position. Long snapper doesn't play a lot. Like it's not but within the year, he has this uncanny, ridiculous skill at long snapping. He's 2nd in the nation and he's traveling all over the world for football camps under invite, right? So you have to expose your kids. Now, like, will he go into the NFL? I don't know. We've got all those other things he's got to fight, right? But he loved football and they found a way because they just kept exploring. And I think when you expose your kids to lots of different sports, it's really weird. I think if I would have grown up in the northern states, the high northern states or Canada, I would have probably done really well at ice hockey. Mm-hmm. I'm wider built. I'm stocky. I'm just kind of like a bull and I can move on ice skates and rollerblades. Like it's like second nature. It's almost easier than walking. That's how I literally feel, but I never got exposure to that. Right. And so there's all these little things that I think of, man, what ifs? And so exposing them to a ton of things is incredibly important. I think another thing that I think is incredibly important, I think you would agree with me, is modeling. Modeling is so important. Like I work out every single day. I go ruck on the weekends. I go on long walks every single morning, and I make sure my kids know about it. And my wife works out like she's crazy. And I think being an active family, we took our kids on hikes and we didn't carry them. They walked themselves, and we would do long miles and build over and over and over again. These are the types of things that build that character and put them in hard places as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, for example, last night I had a late night of working and I still hadn't gotten a workout in. And so got home and Asher wanted to do something. I'm like, hey man, I go get this workout in quick and then we'll get back and we'll do what you want to do. And so, yeah, I think the modeling is huge. So like for me, what's really been a joy for me is, so like I said earlier, I played basketball kind of at all levels, and ended up playing professionally in Europe. And so basketball has been like a major part of my life for a significant portion of it. And now Asher's at an age where, so I still play in leagues and that kind of stuff, where he's finally gotten to an age where he's going to come and he's going to he watches games and then just like shoot on the side while we're playing and starting to get involved in it. And so for me as like a dad, that's a really cool moment to be able to like kind of share that with him and kind of, I mean, obviously I'm biased, so I'm going to he's going to play a lot of basketball. We've got hoops in our yard. We're going to shoot a lot. And so like, he's probably going to enjoy basketball. If he doesn't, not a big deal, but we're definitely going to push it on him. Cause I think he could be a good basketball player as well. I'm not going to let him beat me. Like I'm good. That's why I train for these days, it's why I lift weights and still do all this stuff, because I want to, like, I don't want my kids to be able to beat me until they're out of high school. We'll see if they develop athletically or physically enough to do it. But like, that's like one of my training goals is like, good. I don't want to let my kids beat me at sports, because sports has been a big part of my life. And I just, just part of kind of our dynamic. So that was, I mean, ultimately that was just really fun for me. And I'm going to probably keep playing basketball for as long as I can. And so having him now kind of be part of that and do that and can come to games and watch. And it's just kind of a fun moment as a parent.
But you're doing it right. And I mean this to be convicting to fathers out here who are involved in basketball leagues, who are going to the gym, who are taking care of themselves. The conviction is if your kids aren't involved in that, whether they're going or you're talking to them, like you said to your son, I'm going to work out and then we'll do the thing. You start to display this. If you're not talking through it and exposing them to that, it's all selfish. It is really your duty to show them that you're doing hard work. You're going out there, you're sweating, you're pushing, you're spending the time it takes. And I think a lot of men just get like, this is my time. I'm going to go roll jujitsu. Well, take your son and daughter, let them sit on the sidelines and maybe they'll fall in love with it, and watch them let you go through pain and suffering. And then the other thing I love that you said, which I'd encourage parents to do, don't let your kids win. Like, teach them how to lose. And like, if they lose over and over and over and over again to you, well, they're probably just going to work harder and harder and harder. And I think it's a really great example. Like, my kids got into skateboarding. I'm like, pulled out the skateboard. I'm like, okay, you can ollie that high. I can ollie higher. Okay, you could do that on the half pipe. Let me show you what I can do. And I was like, I would push. And what I saw by always one-upping them, and it's not out of pride. It's out of like, here's what you can do. It's an opportunity to grow. And also there's that, I can help you. I have this experience. That's a lot of it. Like, I have experience. I can do this. I can help you. I don't know if you've noticed, probably not yet, but there's a point where your kids don't think you're good at anything and you have to prove them wrong.
Right.
And so by saying you're going to beat them until they're at least out of high school, I think that's a very valiant and noble.
It's my reason to keep showing up and lifting weights. So, I mean, some other things that we do with our kids too is like, we'll just like, give me 10 push-ups before we do that. Or we try and just kind of build activity into their lives. We have balloons around the house. Like, balloons are like the cheapest, best kid entertainment.
So good.
Like, the value you get from a 5-cent balloon, blow it up and then try and keep it off the ground. Like, it's awesome. And then we just have stuff like around our yard. We've got the trampoline, we've got things hanging from trees. We've got ways that you can just, for me, environment is probably the most important like driver in really any aspect of my life. And so we try and set up an environment that makes being active easy, where there's just like always stuff to do. We've got balls, we've got stomp rockets, we've got trampolines, we've got things hanging from trees, we've got ropes, and like you just out and you just start doing things. It just makes it really easy to be active without having to think about it.
But they might get hurt, Trevor. How dare you? I think that's another thing. Like my kids, want to jump on their bikes when they were younger. I'm like, okay, let me show you how to build a little bigger jump. And they're going to wreck. They're going to have pain and suffering. How do you learn your limits?
Yeah. So I look at it like, all right, will said activity have a high likelihood of resulting in death? Okay, we're probably going to think about it a little bit more. Yeah. Will said activity results in like life-altering injury? Like we might think about it a little bit more. But like outside of those two, man, if you're gonna fall off your bike and get scraped up, like that's part of being a kid, which is really interesting because my wife and I are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum, where she's very much. So here's a good story for you that just happened the other day. So we just got one of these little like, I don't know, Power Wheels things. Like our friends just gave us this thing, you battery in it, and the kids sit in it and they drive around in it. So we live on this like kind of a loop. So you come in, you go around the loop, and you go out. So there's the same entrance and exit. So we don't have very much traffic at all. It's awesome where we live. And so the kids were up and they were going around the loop. And some of our neighbors were doing some construction. So they had this like big dirt pile. And I'm sitting there, I get a text from my wife, and she has a picture of the kids. Asher had like driven this thing up the dirt pile, and they were both out. Like they didn't see my wife taking video and pictures of them. They were like trying to get this Hot Wheel Power Wheels off the dirt pile and moving it around. And they were like on the other side of the loop. So I had no idea where they were anymore. And then my wife sends me a picture. She says, "Don't we have rules around this house?" And I'm just like, like they know they're not supposed to go past that. And for me, I'm very much of the like ask for forgiveness later type. And like, hey, if they do something where we don't like what they did, we'll talk about it afterwards, rather than like having all of these rules in place where they have to follow this, they have to follow that. Like I want them to develop a sense of like, oh, that's a good idea or that's a bad idea. And we're going to try and keep them from catastrophic disaster. But most everything else can be like, what did we learn from that? Was doing that a good decision or not? And learn that way versus, no, this is the rules we set and you need to follow them no matter what, whether you think it's a good idea or not. So
that's a tightrope balance with my wife as well. It's like, well, I like, just let them go. Hey, by the way, when I was growing up, I lived way out on property. I would disappear and I would not come back for like 7 hours. I have my BB gun and backpack and some food. And like, I survived and I learned a lot. And I think that it's really hard to, as a father, knowing that adventure and going out and trying new things and learning from those mistakes is invaluable. And then we have our wives who are a lot more protective. I'm speaking in generalities. It might be flipped in some families,
right?
But it's that's a tough road to walk down. I mean, we've gone through a lot with that.
And I mean, it's a balance, right? And so I'm probably like too far on one end of the spectrum,
right?
And then like she's over here, and so usually we kind of meet in the middle, and we find a good balance. And I think you got to, understanding your kids too and their personalities, and what they may need. Some kids need a little bit, a little tighter boundaries. Some kids you can give a little bit more slack to, but just kind of understanding your kids and adapting a little bit to them and allowing them to, ultimately it's kind of allowing them to make mistakes and allowing them to fail, which can be hard because we want our kids to, be happy and be awesome all the time. But unfortunately, them being happy and being awesome all the time is not a really good strategy for them developing as human beings. And so as organisms, we respond to stressors. And so we need those in our life in order to become productive members of society. And that's ultimately what we're doing, is we want our kids to grow up and be in the community and be productive and be helpful and ultimately be good human beings. And, you have to you have to allow them to fall a few times and get some scrapes and bruises in order for that to happen. So
yeah, I think it's such an important point. I think, man, I mean, you came in asking me questions and I'm sitting here going, I think you've got the right formula, the right formula. The one thing I was wondering about you, because you do have a successful software company, you have a brick and mortar business, you invest in real estate, was like, how are you doing with spending your time with your kids? But you mentioned it very early. I come home, I kind of turn it off. There's some days that go longer. It's the same for me. Turn it off. And then I have to switch my attention, right? Turn that off and move into the family man, the dad, the husband, the friend. And so I think those are the important boundaries.
And for me too, like being a business owner and being kind of entrepreneurial and involved in things, I have to kind of understand my own tendencies. And what I've done is I try and involve them in a lot of stuff. Like, hey, if we're going to look at a property, like you're coming with, or hey, we got to go fix some stuff in the gym in another city. All right, you're coming with. And we try and involve them in those things, because I don't think there needs to be this like direct separation between, all right, here is when I'm working and here is when I'm with my family. Like if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, there has to be a lot of blend, because there are times where like 5 o'clock hits and like I just can't, like there's fires that are going on or there's something that needs to be done. And I think the more you can involve your kids in that, they just they can see that and they can see the inner workings of it. And I mean, it's just a different form of bonding. Like like we don't need to be playing all the time.
Yep.
And so I think involving them, so for me personally, that's kind of how I try to manage a lot of it as well, is just involve them as much as possible. And like they're getting older, like Asher's now going to be 6, like he's getting older and can be more involved in that, which is actually really fun. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of like infant stage. Like that's just like not my jam. Not very
fun.
No. And so like, it's cool to see them develop like physically. And like, I like watching like the developmental process, like, oh, they're crawling and they're rolling and they're doing these things and watching that process. But like, it's just like, there's not a lot there. But now as they're starting to get a little bit older, they're starting to develop personalities and can go out and be more involved. Like, honestly, I'm having more fun with them. And it's fun to see them grow and kind of turn into like more human.
I agree. I've always had my kids, go with me when I own the gym, when I own my bike shop, they'd go with me. And I had boundaries of like when they could go and when they couldn't. But I have a lot of pictures of my son reading on the stack of wall balls. There's a wall ball rack and he's laying on top of it, my youngest. And they have really fond memories of those. But another thing that I do, even go to the extreme, is like when I've had a really hard day with work, I'll talk about it to the family or to my boys. I like car time. When they're older, car time, if you can get them off of their phone, which I can demand, I'm the dad, is undivided attention time. And so I use that opportunity to say, hey, I want you to hear about this that happened to me. Or I'm always have a work thing on cue that relates to what they're going through in school. Like that teacher doesn't like me. She's always picking on me. I'm like, okay, well, what have you done? And then, here's an example when I had a boss and blah, blah, blah. And I talked through my failures a lot. I talk through my failures a lot because I'm like, hey, what's a great way to learn is from other people's failures or your own. And so I think involving them in work is really, really important. You're right. There's a healthy blend there.
So on that point, there's 2 things there to your car time one. So my workout buddy, he decided to do golf lessons with his son in a different city. So they drive about 35 minutes. And he said like the best part about it is not necessarily golf lessons. He's like, yeah, now I suck a little bit less at golf than I did before. And his son is a really good golfer, but he's like, the time we spend in the cars is really what's valuable. He's like, I'm finding out way more about him because they have another son as well. And, when you're at home and it's the evening and it's just like hectic and you're trying to get dinner on the table and like, there's just a lot going on. You can't have those conversations. So like, I mean, spot on with what you said is that car time is huge. And to the other one, I don't remember where I read this, but there's an entrepreneur that every time his kids would come home from college, he wouldn't ask them like what went well this week. He would ask them how they failed this week. Yeah. And and just kept doing that and kept doing that and kept doing that. And finally, as kids kind of realized that it wasn't necessarily that he wanted them to fail. Well, it was that he wanted them to fail, but he didn't want to hear about their failures, but he wanted to know that they were trying things that were above their ability that they weren't able to be successful with. Because then at that point, he knew there was going to be growth rather than always asking about, all right, what went well? You're probably just going to talk about the things that you do well and the things that you already can do well. And that's not where growth comes from. The growth comes from the failures. And so trying to do things that you're not good at yet. And so putting more emphasis on, hey, where are you improving and where are you failing rather than where are you already exceeding or already succeeding. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective as well to help kids just kind of think about the growth mindset and where am I, going above my capacities and starting to fail rather than just staying in my comfort zone and doing the things that I'm good at. So I thought that was a really interesting.
It is. I have another challenge that I took on with my kids in middle school and high school was each day saying, I want to hear your win for the day. And Trevor, you'd be really surprised how hard that is. Mm-hmm. They are designed to focus on, I missed this many things on my test. I didn't quite hit this mark. So we would do that. But then we also always talk about what didn't go so well. And then the failure is never the failure. That's the conversation our family, my boys probably start rolling their eyes. You didn't fail unless you didn't learn from that circumstance.
Right.
And so yes, they roll their eyes, but I think when they're at a certain age, they're going to have a completely different mindset. Like, okay, I didn't hit my mark. What can I do to improve on it? And if I don't try again, that's failure. Mm-hmm. Like and so I think it's really important to like, what did you fail out with the right framing, which I'm sure that guy did with the right framing is really powerful. I really like that.
Yeah, I like it. It's really, and for all of us, like we're figuring it out, right? Like there's no playbook to parenting. There's no, like, every kid is different. You can have two kids that are raised in the exact same family with the exact same values and the exact same environment, and they turn out completely different. And so, I think there's a lot of just like luck to it as well. And all we can do is keep trying things. And I think the more you can kind of personalize it to the kid after you start to understand their personality types, I think can have some benefit. And then, we do the best we can and wish for the best, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just telling my wife, I'm like, summer is a big one. Like we got to get these kids dialed in on doing, my oldest is going to be working. It's working for me, but they've got to be doing something that challenges them.
Yeah.
So, love this conversation, man.
Loved
it. Yeah. And it's really cool hearing from someone like you that's a business owner and you have the younger kids knowing, you're thinking about the right things, which is really encouraging. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this one up?
No, I think that's good. And like all of us, I think it's just about the improvement, right? We talk about it in other aspects of our life. Like, how do we improve and kind of listen to others? What are they doing well? Try things, what works, what doesn't work. And unfortunately, parenting, we all kind of figure it out as we go. And so, so I think what you guys are doing with, the brotherhood thing and helping bring dads together. And because I think sometimes you can be out on an island and you don't know, you don't really have anyone to turn to. I'm fortunate in my kind of small community. I have a couple guys. I have my workout buddy that we work out almost every day together, and a couple other close friends. And so that's a huge piece to be able to bounce ideas off of and really get around other people that are kind of on the same journey, and you help each other just ultimately become better human beings, better fathers all around. So
that's the idea. Yeah. Yeah. And like, I do encourage people, find somebody in your area. Like you should have different circles. You should have these circles of men that you interact with a lot. You just should have some other ones that you get together with that really stretch you, like mastermind type things. It's okay to be involved in an online community as long as it's leading to something else. Like I really like that. And quite frankly, with men, I found this really interesting balance of having like a distant communication relationship with them, but then coming together, things get deeper way faster than being together with someone that you're with. It takes a lot longer in person to break through. It's a really interesting dynamic I've been studying. And So I've made some incredible relationships starting online and then coming together and meeting. And those have grown faster than any other relationship I've ever had.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, live stuff is never going anywhere. That's like people always talk about the gym. Like we went this whole pandemic thing and like, oh, everything's moving online. People are going to work out at home. I'm just like, and the gym is just like, the gym is a community. A gym is a place to see people. Like it's never going to go anywhere because as humans, we crave relationships. We crave human interaction, in-person human interaction. And no matter what we do technology wise, I don't think that's ever going to go anywhere. Like to be able to touch someone, hug someone, high five someone, like that's just like, that's like in our DNA as humans. So, you know, it's awesome.
Right on. Thanks so much for joining, brother. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for listening. You know the drill. Do the thing on this podcast. Rate it, subscribe, give us a review. Hey, even if you didn't enjoy it, let us know. And check out the big event. It's brotherhoodfatherhood.com. And if you're not in the Facebook group, that's just somewhere you should go because a lot of information goes there. Even if you're not a Facebook type person, go there. We got some exciting things that are going to pull you away from Facebook and into a tighter community. So be watching for that. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, the Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.